Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. Tuesday, November 12th, 2024, regular board meeting. If we can begin with a pledge to the flag. Can I call up the students from West Elementary to lead the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Great job. Coincidentally enough, they did the pledge. The school spotlight this month is on West Elementary, and they have a cool video to share with us.
Thank you for coming in today, and happy Veterans Day.
Well, thank you for having me. It was an honor to serve.
I understand you work at the West Seneca schools.
Yes, I do. I work in the technology department. I'm the senior technician.
What branch of the military did you serve?
I was in the United States Navy.
How long did you serve?
3 years, 7 months, and 14 days. I enlisted in October of 1998, and I was discharged in June of 2002 due to a combat injury.
Where were you stationed?
I was stationed on the USS Harry S. Truman CVN 75, that's an aircraft carrier, and then after my injury I was attached to PSD Sewell's Point in Norfolk, Virginia at the Naval Air Station Norfolk.
What are you most proud of in your time in the service?
I would say I was most proud of the ability to serve my country.
What was the best part of being in the military?
The best part of being in the military was the camaraderie that we shared amongst each other and the feeling of the sense of purpose that was gained while I was in the military.
Thank you, Grandpa, for coming in for Veterans Day.
Well, thank you, Lincoln. It's an honor to be here today.
What branch in the military did you serve in?
The United States Air Force.
How long did you serve in?
I served for 4 years in the United States Air Force from 1969 to 1973.
Where were you stationed?
I was stationed in Alexandria, Louisiana, which is in the heart, the center of the state of Louisiana.
What are you most proud of in your time in the service?
I was very proud that I was there as a member of the United States Air Force serving my country.
What was the best part of being in the military?
The best part about being in the military was meeting so many people from other parts of the country, finding out how they lived and how their differences between us.
What branch of the military did you serve?
Well, when I was in the military, I was with the United States Marine Corps.
How long did you serve?
I served for 6 years. I went in the military in 2011, and I got out in 2016, 8 years ago.
Where were you stationed?
When I was in the military, I was stationed in Hawaii, but I got to visit all over the world. I got to see a lot of cool things.
What are you most proud of in your time in the service?
What was I most proud of? I think being able to say that I was part of the 1% that went to the military, well, to the Marines, and every time I come home, the thanks and appreciation everyone had for what I was doing.
What's the best part of being in the military?
All the brothers and sisters that that you have that you don't know you have until you get there. You guys all go through a lot of stuff together, and you guys make a bond like you and Ivory have, and you guys never lose that. I still talk to the same people I went to boot camp.
Guys, I was in the United States Army. I was drafted in 1969.
How long did you serve?
1 year, 11 months, and 4 days. I was at Fort Dix, New Jersey, and I was in Chu South Vietnam.
What are you most proud of in your time in the service?
I'm mostly proud of the fact that I was able to serve my country. I learned discipline, I learned responsibility, and it gave me an honorable discharge, which to this day has been beneficial for me for all these years.
What was the hardest part of being in the service?
The hardest part of being in the service was being drafted and then being away from home for all that time when I was sent to Vietnam, and knowing that I was going into a war zone, and it was very dangerous at the time. So, I had to worry about, things that could happen while I was serving in Vietnam.
Thank you, Aunt Michelle, for coming in today. And thank you for your service.
Thank you for having me.
What branch of the military did you serve?
I was in the Air Force.
How long did you serve?
4 years.
Where were you stationed?
I mainly was stationed at Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska.
Where is the coolest place you've been?
I would say my most favorite places that I went to were, we did a 3-stop tour over about a 6-month period. I was in Japan, and then we went to Singapore, and then we went to Malaysia.
Thank you, everybody. West Elementary was proud to highlight our special veterans tonight, as we do every year at Veterans Day for our Veterans Day lunch hosted by the PTA. Students have a chance to invite their special veteran in and talk to them, get to share a meal and conversation. And our presentation tonight had some of those special moments. So thanks in advance to our students, or thank you to our students, and thank you to our special guests, and thank you to any veterans, including Mrs. Goitia and Mr. Oliver, who are with us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Duggan. If I could ask our awesome students from West Elementary that are here tonight, if you could please stand to be recognized, and also any veterans that are in attendance tonight, if you could please stand to be recognized. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Kruger for the superintendent's report. Thank you for that great video. That was awesome.
Thank you very much. I do have a few updates that I'd like to share with the Board of Education. We had our first session of our Strategic Planning Committee meeting. This committee has 26 stakeholders on it: teachers, administrators, school counselors, social worker, parent representatives, and student representatives. And the first meeting was a bit unique. It was really laying the foundation for this group moving forward. You may be aware that New York State is looking at evolving graduation requirements for students, moving away from and de-emphasizing the 5 Regents exam requirement that has been longstanding as a pathway to access a diploma in New York State, and giving greater flexibility and different pathways for students to be able to earn a diploma in New York State. So the first half of the meeting was really spent discussing and talking about what are the exit criteria that we want to see in West Seneca graduates, and that was framed as the portrait of a graduate, which is the same language that New York State is using in their evolving graduation requirements for the portrait of a graduate. This group will be assembled again on November 20th for our next meeting, where we'll continue to do our work in identifying our strategic planning goals for the upcoming school year. We also held a Budget Advisory Committee meeting. The Budget Advisory Committee has representatives from both central office and our bargaining units. The first meeting was held on November 7th, and this meeting really helped to build foundational understanding of the budget development process. We reviewed with Mr. Thiel, our business official, an overview of our budget presently as to what was currently budgeted and our expenses related to healthcare and also payroll expenses, and we reviewed the budget development calendar. And then also Mr. Thiel shared an overview of our reserves for the Budget Advisory Committee. Next, another district-wide committee meeting that I'll share a very brief update. We have more time allocated later in the agenda, is our redistricting committee. The redistricting committee met on October 17th. We're going to be seeking some feedback from the Board of Education around parameters for the redistricting committee so that that will help guide their next steps, and they will be meeting again on November 21st. I'd also like to highlight some awesome things going on throughout the district since our last board meeting. We had Finding Nemo at West Senior High School, which was an amazing performance of very talented actors and musicians, and also East Senior High School hosted the drama 4 a.m. At Winchester Potters Elementary School, Mrs. Brady and her team has partnered with Erie One BOCES, and they held a career fair for students at Winpot Elementary. It was such a success that there's conversation and a desire to try to duplicate something like this in other elementary schools. So more to come on that. Additionally, we had some great events for our students in our academy programs. Our engineering academy participated in the Rocketry Challenge at Moog on October 25th, and our finance and digital media academy students participated in the Mad City Muddy Challenge on October 30th, which really gave students a hands-on, real-life experience where they had to budget for a month with a lot of different considerations and constraints that were thrown their way. I also am pleased to give an update on our two gymnasiums that were undergoing renovations. The gymnasiums both at Northwood Elementary and at Winchester Potters are now complete and being enjoyed by our students. We are grateful that we had some cooperative weather this fall because our gymnasiums were not open this fall when school resumed, but they are open and they are beautiful, and the students couldn't be more excited. So thank you to everyone for their support of those renovations. I also want to congratulate our English language learners and our ENL teachers under the leadership of Carol Bush, who hosted the ENL Cultural Celebration Dinner last week. It was a beautiful event where we celebrated the culture of our students, and students got to taste different foods from various cultural backgrounds and engage in some cultural learning that evening. We also had the Reading Rover on site, and all students left with books to take home with them. A few highlights as we wrap up our fall sports season, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say that we might be getting updates from our volleyball playoff games tonight. Both East and West Senior High School are in volleyball playoff games tonight, but we have a few highlights that I wanted to share. We have two cross-country runners, Jack and Ryan, who qualified for the state-level competition, and also Ethan Skalski has been named the Channel 4 Scholar Athlete of the Month, and Ethan is on the East Senior volleyball team. So congratulations to those student athletes. As we saw from that beautiful video, we had some amazing assemblies and events on Friday to honor Veterans Day. As you heard, our friends at West Elementary School hosted a Lunch with the Vet event on Friday. That was co-sponsored by their PTA, and there was a Veterans Day assembly at West Senior High School. That was an absolutely beautiful event filled with powerful speakers and moving music. So many thanks to our schools who went out of their way to honor Veterans Day and to teach our students why we had off school from yesterday and the respect that we have for honoring our veterans. As we look ahead, I have some important dates that I just wanted to get on the board's radar. This Saturday, we have our legislative breakfast. From the legislative breakfast, I'll be welcoming New York State master teachers who will be assembled for professional development Saturday morning at East Senior High School. We also have an additional Board of Education work session, and that is, if needed, if we need more time following tonight's discussion with the board on redistricting, we do have a placeholder for next Tuesday for an additional board work session if needed. I did highlight for you already upcoming committees, our Strategic Planning Committee and Redistricting Committee that will both be meeting later this month. School will not be in session for the Thanksgiving recess, November 27th through the 29th. And then back when we resume school on December 2nd, we will have our next Budget Advisory Committee meeting. And we start the holiday concert season in December with a few of our first holiday concerts listed there for your reference in early December. So a wonderful time with some great activities going on in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Move on to the board president's report. Again, I know last month I thanked the board for everything they're doing, especially Laura with we had some training tonight on working through our evaluation process. That's a lot of work, and thank you for all the hard work you're putting into it. And again, thank you to the board for being involved in, it seems like every day that there's a couple of board members somewhere. I was getting texts about how great the food was at the NL dinner or at the Veterans Day ceremony, or we had a bunch of interviews that we were involved in. So again, as a board, the 7 of us, I really appreciate all the time and effort you guys are putting into this district, and Lisa and everyone involved. Thank you for including us and making us a part of it. I'm going to turn it back over to you, and we love the cookies and the music that was here, and hopefully you can thank them for doing it.
Absolutely. In the doorway, we have music teacher, Mr. Trevor Jalewski, who helped to coordinate tonight's music. We had our a cappella group called Acafellas. So they were entertaining us on our way into the board meeting tonight, and also our orchestra students from West Senior High School. So many thanks to them. All of the desserts and treats, please help yourself on your way out. Those are all provided to us by our culinary students that participate in the culinary program through Erie One BOCES. So just a few small gestures as gratitude for the Board of Education for your service and for all that you do to serve the students of our school community. Many thanks.
Thank you. And everyone, I believe, has a little packet of some different things. Take a minute and go. This is one of my favorite things about is getting all the little letters and the notes. It's a lot of fun. Check them out. I did empty out my computer case. I'm going to fill it with cookies. Everyone grab cookies on your way out. I'll just leave the computer here and I'm going to fill it up. They were great. Thank you.
We also have new name plaques for our newer board members and Dr. Kruger. So thank you for that.
Those are great. I believe Mr. Brinker and the students at West worked on them. Everyone got their name. They look great. It's nice to have them, and I look forward to us keeping that tradition alive. Thank you for pointing that out. We will move on to our open public comments. Is there anyone that would like to speak this evening? I don't believe I have anyone signed up, so I will not make you listen to my little spiel. If anyone? Okay, great. I'll remind everyone that there's other ways of getting a hold of us too. If you're interested, you can either email us, you can reach out to any representative from the school or give the district office a call or email us and we'll find a way to talk to you. You don't have to wait a whole month to come up. Anyone got any time they want to talk? There's my email is, I'm sure, somewhere. My phone number is somewhere. Call the district office and Melissa will give it to you if you want it. So thank you for that.
It's actually linked on our monthly newsletter that we started to release through, what's the platform again that we're using?
Jessica, what's the platform that we're using for the monthly newsletter?
Through S'more, okay.
Through Smart?
So it's right on the website and also has a link to our contact information.
Okay, this would be, let me just, when does the newsletter go out specifically? Are we doing it a certain?
We're working on
it?
a schedule, but we're
Okay.
trying to release it before the next board meeting, so it's a summary of things that we did in that month.
Okay, and is there going to be a link to each of our email addresses or
The
BOE
website has
questions?
that, and there's a link to the contact page that has all of it.
Great, thank you. And again, thank you guys for working on that. That's, I mean, I love it. Thank you. No public comments. Okay. We will move on to number 4, consent agenda. Everyone knows the consent agenda kind of encompasses a lot of the important stuff we do, but not necessarily go through every line. So if I may have a motion on the consent agenda, it's 4 through 8. And it'll be either a motion to approve, table, anything.
I'll make a motion to approve 4 through 8.
Motion to approve consent agenda 4 through 8.
I'll second it.
Second from Sarah. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Consent agenda passes 7-0. You got it?
I'd like to invite Dr. Jen Cervoni up to make a few comments regarding the personnel items that the Board of Education just took action on.
Thank you, Dr. Kruger. Board of Education, I'd just like to thank you and appreciate your work. My role here lets me see firsthand the commitment and dedication that Board of Education needs to make, and it makes a difference, so thank you. Retirements, we have 3 retirements on our agenda tonight. Anyone retiring here in our audience today, if you could stand to be recognized. Trevor, you can't retire yet. Anyway, I'd like to just thank a lot of years of service. I know each of these individuals and like to thank them for their commitment to our district. We have a special recognition for a tenure appointment. I know Brad is here tonight. Brad, would you please stand for a moment? Brad is a music educator out of Winchester, Potter. And he is joined by his principal, Mrs. Brady. Ms. Brady, you want to stand and just say a few words about Brad?
Yes, we are very lucky to have Brad at Winchester Potters the entire time he's been here. Very innovative, creative. He works with our EPK students at both Northwood and Winchester, and we're just really lucky to have him. So that's a great addition.
And the drums are loud, I heard. Congratulations, Brad. We have several appointments on our agenda tonight. I would ask anyone that was been appointed or hired to our district and joining our family, please stand and be recognized. If you two ladies could remain standing for just a minute, I want to start with Rachel Eschenauer. To our left, Rachel is joining us next month as the new assistant principal at West Senior, returning back home, as we like to say, to West Senior. Rachel, are you joined by anyone tonight or here by yourself?
I'm here by myself. My husband had private practice tonight, and the kids are with my mom, so that they're
Really excited for you to come back to West Senior and looking forward to all the great things you'll do for our district, so welcome. And, yep. And I'd also like to introduce Jennifer Jones. Jennifer was appointed just now as our next transportation supervisor. Jen comes to us with a lot of experience in the field, and it runs in the family. Jen, would you mind introducing who you're here with tonight?
Absolutely. I'm Jennifer Jones. My husband Richard, my daughter Alexa, and this is my mother Charlotte. She is a retired school bus driver with over 25 years experience as a school bus driver. My old district at Lake Shore. So I'm very pleased to be here and really grateful for our meeting today. So thank you so much.
Jen, we are excited about your passion and commitment to the industry and really looking forward to the great work you're going to do. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much.
Jennifer, you said at the interview that your mom would sub in our district. We got it, we're good? Okay.
That's a hard no.
I want to thank everybody, and at some point, we will probably do a 5-minute recess. I would love it if any of the tenure or the new hires stick around till that point so we can all say hello and give you some cookies. Thank you. Okay, I'll move on to number 9. Create classified positions. May I have a motion on all of 9?
I'll make a motion to approve number 9.
Motion to approve all of 9?
I'll second.
Second. Any discussion on 9?
Is this position, was that in the consent agenda, the person that's getting that position?
Yes.
Yes, it was.
I would just ask, possibly in the future, if we're going to do that, if we could pull them out of the consent agenda, just in case there ever is a question and we don't create the position, I would need for them to already be appointed and then us create the position.
That makes sense.
Would it be, and Nicole can probably answer this, would it be better to put, if we're creating positions, would we be better to move them before the consent agenda? If we did that, would we be okay just to leave them right in that group unless there was an issue?
Well, I just think it'd be better to pull it out just because if there was ever an issue where it wasn't created, now they're still lumped into the consent.
Yeah, no, I was
We always
thinking,
vote on those
so like number 9, we would have that as number,
4.
Procedurally, the
Procedurally?
position should be created before we appoint someone to it. So procedurally, either create the position first or, certainly as you're suggesting.
yeah, we'll have that fixed for next time, readjusted. Thank you for that. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 7-0. 10, may I have a motion for all of 10? There's
I'll make a motion to approve all of 10.
Laura, motion to approve all of 10. May I have a second to approve all of 10?
I'll second.
Jeremy? Okay. Any discussion on anything in 10? Anyone? I'll throw out there, of course, thank you for the donations. Parents of the West Seneca West football players, for the varsity and JV football teams. That's awesome. Anything else? Good. No other discussion then? All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 7-0. We'll move on to our, do we want to do Board of Education discussion, or do you want to do a brief few-minute recess? I'm cool either way. Just looking for consensus.
Do the release so everybody can do what they want to, and then we can go on with discussion.
Okay, yeah. Okay, cool. We'll pretend like it's a 5-minute recess, but it'll probably be more like 10. Great. How's that?
Should we say we're not going to do any regular business besides the discussion?
I think we should have a motion to have a recess.
Oh, okay. May I have a motion to have a recess?
I'll make a motion to adjourn to recess.
Marla, may I have a second?
I'll second that.
Reed?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, we'll be back in 5 to 10 minutes. We won't be conducting any more like voting on hiring or any important things. We will have Board of Education discussion, and then I believe we'll be going into executive at that point. But there's really no more public voting going on. Thank you. We're going to move on to number 12, our Board of Education discussion. The only thing on my list is the redistricting discussion. Before we move into that, I just want to make sure, is there anything else anyone wants to address as far as Board of Ed discussion? Everyone good? Okay, let's, I guess I'll hand it over to Tony Day.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Thanks for having me back. Last month, when we got toward the end of the meeting and time grew long, we were missed having some conversations about guidelines that were provided by the redistricting committee at their October meeting. And then there was some more time to talk about boundaries, like things that you want to make sure in some of the recommendations, some things maybe you want to eliminate, and different factors that we would like to try and get clarity about before the committee begins to meet again next Thursday night. So you generously offered some more of your time tonight. And really, it's a conversation for you to have, to ask questions and to give me feedback heading back to the meeting to make sure that we are doing the work that makes your job as easy as possible. So in front of you is a document that we prepared, and kind of Dr. Klugenhardt prepared in consideration of trying to move the process and begin the conversation a little bit. And it talks about some of the key things that we would, as a committee, would want to know more about and get your thoughts about before we get into the meat of the work, which will really start this month. So as we start at the top, the very first two rows in the table are just a restatement of the recommendations from the redistricting committee on the priorities for the process. And they are in two groups. The first row is the critical priorities, ones that the committee said were really important to have, and the others were important if possible. So it says, it's a triage. But really what the committee's saying, we need to get these first 7 bullets accomplished through this process, and if we can, we'd like to try to address the others if it's possible, while still maintaining their integrity. And, Ms. Greenberg raised a great point last time. We didn't have a lot of time to think and consider it, so I thought it'd be important to come back and just revisit and say, here are those priorities. And, just if you remember, the critical priorities, the first one had to do with, addressing enrollment and variations and variables creating class size discrepancies at the elementary level. Meaning in some 4th grades, we have 28 in every class, and in other rooms, in other schools, there are 17 or fewer. And how can we get greater equity in that? Second is a lack of space resulting in inappropriate class sizes that kind of married together. And it kind of goes with, there's in some places, even if you provided additional staffing, it wouldn't make a difference. There's no place to put them in order to have. So that's where the space issue creates some inappropriate class sizes. Unbalanced enrollments resulting in inefficient use of space. And that's a situation where there are some places where they are so rich with space that interventionists working with 1 or 2 kids get an entire classroom, while in another setting, there's 4 interventionists working with 5 or 6 kids put in the same room. There's places where there's just extra space, where in other places it's really, really tight. Lack of space interferes with providing quality experiences. At some of the schools, the fact that they have so many students in a place really not built for that many kids results in issues with parking and transportation, parents coming in and out, special programming, because that space was really not designed to have as many students in it, and it creates some issues there. Some special area and special education teachers not having dedicated classroom space and having to travel. Traveling teachers have more difficulty setting up a learning environment conducive to that curriculum, to that discipline, when they're forced to take a configuration of another teacher. Like, if you're traveling, and having been a traveler once in my career, you go into a room that's set up for somebody else's discipline, but you have to try to teach something that requires a different configuration. It is not ideal for the teacher, and most importantly, not ideal for the student. So having dedicated teaching spaces for classroom teachers in special education classrooms is part of one of the things that we look to try to address. And then finally, the elementary self-contained classes are placed right now in where there seems to be space as opposed to natural connections. And I believe we talked last time about how you have a K to 2 self-contained classroom for a certain classroom style, like an 811 or a 1211. You prefer to have another sister program or a couple program at the intermediate level, so those students they could remain in the same school building and not have to change classes. That doesn't exist in some places. In some places it does, in some places it does not. So those were the critical priorities that the committee recommended. The important, or if possible ones, were some students having to travel across the district, and that mostly affects English as new language students who, regardless of where they live in the district, they have to attend E&L instruction in Northwood or East Middle or East High School. And I won't tell you that this is the only district that does it. Sometimes for economy of scale, because of the numbers, you put your kids together. But again, it creates opportunities for some of the kids that are potentially more at risk, having to have more transportation issues for attendance. So that's why some districts look to then put kids back in, if possible, into their home schools, or at least to, maybe in this case, on each side of the district. Some students are not attending schools closest to their home. That's especially the case, in certain places, there's Allendale students that live next door to Winchester Potter that are going to a school on the other side. And there's actually students on the east side of the school district within a stone's throw of the East Secondary Campus. They're actually going to school on the west side. If possible, that would be something potentially to look at. And then one of the things we did mention, we had some conversation about the possibility of, at the secondary level, the demographics of your schools are fairly compatible, meaning in terms of at-risk indicators, and we talked about some of those last night, being E&L status, special education, students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. There's general balance at your secondary level, but at the elementary level, there's less balance. And there are some schools, you have a district-wide free and reduced lunch rate in the high 30% rates, but in some schools you have 30%, in 2 schools they exceed 50 to 55%. And it creates a higher concentration again, and then when you put in some of the higher needs special education students, it just creates higher needs students concentrated. And what do we think about that? That was one the committee said we would like to have more conversation, learn more about it. That will be a topic of conversation at our meeting on the 21st, where we'll present some, research, which I will give you a little advance peek. It's inconclusive. There's research on both sides that says it has merit. There's an ethical piece that says you want to have equity and equal distribution so that students in all of your schools attend school with students that look like everybody else. From a learning perspective, there's mixed reviews on whether or not there's demonstrated impact on learning. It's very similar to impact on, have you ever heard of tracking, which is a practice of having, some advanced kids in this class and some struggling kids in this class and average kids in this class. The evidence on whether that has impact for the kids is mixed. And so there's some reviews say it matters and has, not to do it has impact, and some will say it does not. But that's kind of a little research look. But if we could just start, did you have any other questions on that, or are you okay at this juncture? Because you can always, change. It would be helpful not to change, but you could always make changes to these later on. But in terms of those priorities that were recommended, are there any questions, or do you want further discussion? Or are you okay with at least starting the process with these being kind of priorities for the work?
I'm okay with it.
Thank you, Jeremy. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about these?
I have a question about the configurations of the plan, where it says at least one will maintain the current grade level
Mr. Baker,
configuration.
I'm going to go to that next. I'm going to do them in strands.
Oh,
So this whole I'm not asking really good on the whole document, just the first 2 rows.
All right, the preamble? Yes. Perfect.
Everybody's okay then with these priorities being good starters as a start?
I mean, no disrespect at all. The facilities for all schools should be available in after-school hours. I do think that's something we should be considering. I think a lot of the facilities are available through building permits and stuff now, like PTAs have a certain night. I don't know how much time we are stressing about it with redistricting. I just want to get your opinion on the board's.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. That was people thought it was important, but it wasn't as important as the top.
Yeah,
it's one of those if possible pieces.
Yes, and I think it's important, but I don't think it, and again, everyone here, correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't affect how we're redistricting or if we're redistricting. I think that should be a board/administration discussion in general.
I think some of the feedback on that I got in some of my pre-meetings was that there are some schools where there's so many kids trying to do so many things that they occupy with practice times and different activities, they go much later. and they start to squeeze out that community's ability to use things at night, where other schools can get them done faster, and thus it frees it up more often. So it was just, when I asked for feedback about some of the concerns, that was one, and I didn't want to exclude it, but I wanted to include it in the conversation, so.
Okay, I mean, I don't mind.
It is about scheduling, and I guess having enough space so that it doesn't prohibit people from having activities in that school, where in other places they can have many, many activities.
Yeah, again, I don't mind excluding it as part of the redistricting conversation, but that's just me.
I think that was also with the elementary buildings, when we were talking about changing times and things of that nature, having before school or after school programming available for those families if their times change and then there's a need for that. So I think part of that is lumped into that statement.
So I think I guess the way I would frame it is we develop some recommended plans for you to consider. They got to check all the bullets at the top, and then we begin to say, can we achieve these other bullets, and what exactly does, would that look like? And we can include that as part of whether or not we can achieve those becomes part of the discussion when the recommended plans come through. But Ms. Peterworsick, I think that's, I'm not living in here as much as everybody. I think it had to do with some of the late timelines and then buses and then trying to get it in. It also had something to do with some of the middle, like at West Middle, the opportunity to use facilities after school is more difficult than at East Middle because there's so much more space. So, but that's where we'll get a lot of feedback from the committee about the importance of that, and as far as we can go forward with that. But some of it is, I agree that it's a scheduling issue as much as it's anything else. Whether or not, I guess the idea was to make sure that no activity would be excluded because there just wasn't space to hold it in.
Yeah, again, I don't see that happening now, and I also see it as a board priority regardless of what we do. So I just don't need personally.
Well, I'm going to take your feedback. I'll say the board in general is okay with this, but I'll make sure I make a note of your thoughts on the space issue.
And then the other thing is, I want to see a little more priority with some students don't attend closest to the school. Like, I want to be clear, my opinion.
Yeah.
I'll get a shirt made, so my opinion. Just my opinion, the board can decide. I think that should be a big priority when it comes to just your neighborhood. Like, again, a whole group of kids traveling past Winchester Potters to go to Allendale. I mean, however we decide, there may be some people that don't want to keep doing that. I think that should be a priority, just higher up.
Can I ask a question about that? So just piggybacking off of what Ed said there, do we have any data to show, well, let me ask two questions. First, what's the longest students would be traveling across the district, if we know? Like, how long would it be?
I don't have that official knowledge.
Okay.
I would say that to go from the west side of the district over to Northwood, my guess is
I think I could answer
20
that.
minutes or so.
I could help with that. So, you know where the McKinley Mall is?
Yeah.
Okay, so before you get to the McKinley Mall, it's the furthest outskirt of the district to that part of bordering Frontier. With those students who live in apartments there, the Frontier border, travel to Northwood for ENL services.
And so just in terms of like busing and what that length of time would be during rush hour, so.
Well, that's right. I think,
Yeah.
if you're driving it without picking up kids, it's probably 15 at rush hour, it's 15 to 20 minutes. Throw stops in along the way.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're going to expand that probably to 30 to 40 minutes.
So my real question there is the impact on the students with
Right.
learning, right? So if there's been any studies done, at least, I think there have been, but, in the district or, in similar districts to ours, what the impact would be for traveling 35, 40 minutes.
We also talked about last year having services for students who need them most and not just because of location. So while I like the idea of attending closest, if the services cannot be provided at least at the level they're receiving them now, I would be concerned about moving them. Do you know what I mean? So I do want to make sure that those services are still in place for the students in the best concentration.
Yeah, I don't want to make a blanket statement and say every kid has to go to their closest school.
Right.
But I would like to see that as one of the main priorities of every kid should be going to their closest school unless,
We can't provide the adequate services.
like say, and I don't know this, but say we could only provide one class of ENL. I don't want them to not go to that class, so again, I definitely want it looked at. I would like that be more of a priority than just this. It's, again, just me, so. board
I
consensus?
think there's some, some caveats. So you can make a recommendation, so for ENL and students with special needs going to self-contained classrooms, there's not you could not create extra classes. That's a staffing and budget issue, and you would exceed your tax cap. So for ENL, you'd have to likely, if you wanted to have, even if you wanted to have programming on both sides of the district, you probably have to double your staffing, right? Just because you need certain numbers of kids. You have to do push-in service and you have to do pull-out service.
Right.
And so right now, and usually it's not a function of numbers, it's a function of kids. There's 5 different levels of ENL instruction, and you have to be able to have the kids in that instruction. So you can't just have a like one teacher can service this many kids, and if you take this many and move them over, you need a teacher over here for these kids, and you need a teacher over here. So we're cognizant of certain things when it's general classroom instruction, that I think there was more onus where if they live next to the school, they should go to the school. But if it's for students that need specialized instruction, that the travel across the district is part of the need, the way to create the service in a fiscally prudent way. The question is, do you have to have it, is there ways to minimize that? Are there opportunities? Or can we have enough space to create that opportunity should the district choose to go that route budgetarily down the line? That could be another goal, is to create a situation where you have the capacity, you have space capacity to do it. You're not limited by space, but then it's also a function of your budget process. And this committee doesn't do budget decisions. The goal of this committee is to create capacity, enrollment decisions and capacity to be able to meet the needs of today and down the line into the future.
So what I would think is, if we were to say there were a few proposals, one proposal hypothetically was keep ENL in a centralized location. So I would like to see the pluses and the minuses. Pluses are budgetary concerns, better programming for one entire group. Negatives might be, again, traveling not at your closest. So I'd like to almost see the pros and cons of both keeping it and moving it.
Sure.
Multiple. Clearly, we're not going to do every building,
Yep.
but different parts of the district.
Yep.
And I carefully say different parts of the district. I'm trying to get away from using both sides of town,
Yeah.
because I'm tired of there being sides of town. But it could be, northern, southern, as opposed to east and west, somewhere central, just different parts of the district.
The ENL question, I lived both ends of it, because to create an economy of scale, when we got started in difficult budget times, we had all the kids go to one elementary school. But in our district, the travel time we were very small geographically, but when times improved fiscally, we believed that we wanted kids in their schools in the neighborhoods. So we moved kids back and we made budgetary decisions to support it. So I think, one of my goals personally would be to create the capacity to be able to expand ENL instruction should budgetary considerations allow it. So if we're good with that, now we'll go to the next 2 rows kind of fit together. And the idea being that my goal would be to bring you not a plan to consider, but several plans that you can have conversation around, and then offer through motion, seconds, and approval what the board's decision would be. So the goal would be to bring you 2 to 3 plans. And the reason that I've kind of honed in on 2 to 3 is that if you get more, it gets very, very difficult to understand them with the depth that you would need to make an informed decision. If you start getting 5 or 6 plans and all the things that go with it, I think it's very challenging. If you are kept informed along the way and have these kind of conversations, I think 2 to 3 would be the very best, and your feedback will certainly be part of that process that brings those plans to you. The goal would be to have one plan and this was my recommendation based on the feedback from the thought exchange, both from last year and this year, is to have one plan that that does its best to maintain configurations as they are. A pre-K to 5, a 6 to 8, 9 to 12, with 2 middle schools, 2 high schools. Then to have other configurations that take a look at combining grade levels in different fashions to create more efficiency and more opportunities. So one plan, my goal would be to bring you a plan that tries to work within the boundary, within the framework here that we have now, 5 K-5 elementaries, 2 6-8 middles, 2 9-12 high schools, and have the committee do its very best to meet the priorities given that configuration. And then give the committee the license to look at other potential configurations that could be consolidating grade levels within an elementary level, creating a new configuration. Like some districts have created intermediate schools. They've created 5, 6 academies, which could then take advantage of space where, where does the district have more space available? Well, it has more space available in East Middle. And where might it also have space available to take a look at? And then it could be reconfiguring the K-12, whole K-12 piece. And remember, each plan, when we bring it to you, would have a full rationale, an anticipated frequently asked question document, and clearly, trying to really get into great depth. And the beginnings of an implementation plan, how would that be done, and what kind of timeline would it take? So that's where, Mr. Beatty, you were working, you had some concern last time about not wanting to limit anything, and I don't want to get the idea that we're limiting anything. We just want to my recommendation is based on the feedback. You want to have one that you're going to look at that would meet about half of the feedback, which is maintain what we got, and another that says, let's look at some other possibilities that might be able to do some really great things for kids, and it might require some bigger changes to be made to get there. Now, I don't have the details, we haven't done that yet, but I mean, that's kind of the idea, so I'm curious, what are your thoughts in that regard?
So my thoughts are just, you're looking at, we use two different words here. We use redistricting and we use reconfiguration. And they're two different things.
They are different things.
So we have, in my estimation, four options. Reconfigure the way that we do grading in our schools. So you talked about, pre-K to, what we currently have, pre-K to 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 12. That's what we currently have. So we're not going to change that configuration, then that means we're redistricting. Or we're reconfiguring with some redistricting. That would be option 3. Yeah, option 4 is we do nothing.
Option 4 is what?
Do nothing.
Well,
That's
right.
the only.
You can do nothing.
Right.
Right. In the end, an option could be you don't take any of the recommendations and you decide to play it out as it is.
Yeah.
And I think that point of a hybrid is an important nuance to make, because it could mean that some configurations stay as is, other configurations change. So for example, as Tony gave one example of a common configuration, other districts may have a pre-K to 2 structure and then a grade 3 through 5 structure. So that would mean reconfiguration at the elementary level, but potentially middle school, high school remains as is. That would be a potential hybrid where some configurations change and yet others don't.
Right. Or you could do that reconfiguration at an elementary grade level and still have to move a line a little bit to move some students into another side.
To create all the other things you want, which is appropriate classroom space. So it's not, there's an issue of equitable or fairly equal classroom enrollments, and there's also an issue of size. So if you need to create space in a school, you likely, in order to be able to keep that space for a period of time, some kids that currently go to that space have to go to a different space. I mean, for instance, at West Middle, the concern there is not so much enrollment. Their class sizes are manageable and they're not out of whack with where you might expect them to be, but there's just not enough space to provide learning spaces that are appropriate for everybody. So in order to create a space, this room that now has kids in it, they have to be educated somewhere else to create a space. So it may require that you keep some parts could be maintained, but other parts you might have to think about a hybrid of sorts to tweak the boundaries, but also to rethink how and where we might educate those kids.
And there are members on the committee that understand why we did that in the first place, why we moved 6th grade out of elementary buildings and put them into a place that they're now overcrowded.
Right.
So things have changed. I mean, it wasn't that simple.
Well, when decisions were made, there were different situations in place, and it's a completely different context. So that was the concept of it, like some of the ideas that were already being explored should be re-explored and re-looked at, but there might be other options. But they have to be able to we have to believe that they are sustainable over time. And we have to really use the enrollment projections that we have, which is the best we have. And even those enrollment projections that you see that show right now a slight decline and then a leveling off. That's what especially at your secondary level, there's going to be a little bit more decline, and then at all your grades, it's basically going to level out fairly. It might go down a little bit, but not enough to really cause tremendous changes. So, but then you have to look, will this plan work this year? Will it work next year? And do we think it's our best understanding that it's going to work 10 years from now? Because what you don't want to do is have to, 3 or 4 years later, have to make a decision because things have changed. But you have to be prepared that it could change. Different factors could happen. The birth rate has been dropping in Erie County and across the nation for a long time. It used to be 2.2 kids per family, and now it's about 1.7. And that's one of the reasons you've seen this enrollment decline has happened everywhere in Western New York. But that doesn't mean you might not have some other, in other districts I know that they have to consider adding classroom space back because they have so many English as new language students that have moved into the district. And it is, they'd either have to think about moving kids back into home schools or they'd have to add classroom space. But these things could happen. There's no guarantees that 10 years from now, the conditions won't be different and a different group of people sitting here won't have to do it. But we're going to try to offer you recommendations based on the best thinking about what it looks like 10 years from now.
And that's why your comment about building capacity, knowing too that we have an increase in certain populations and the special education populations, self-contained classrooms. We have agencies that are not taking students that traditionally were going to agencies. We'd like to bring those students home to their home school. And if that's a priority for us, then we have to build space for them, appropriate space for those children to be educated.
So the numbers and plans, obviously I have thoughts on that, but kind of to bump back a little bit, I almost want the board to make a decision, and this is something that Will brought up last year, and we talked about 10 years ago when we did it. What is the optimal building capacity? What percentage do we want to look at having a building used to allow room for growth? And if I'm not mistaken, that number might have been 70%. Does anyone know it? Or can we look into it on what? And I know classrooms are different sizes, but there's a number of, like,
I'm going to offer this as a former building principal and a superintendent. What I probably don't want is just rooms with nothing in them. So I think my definition of capacity would be that you have the capacity to set class targets that can expand so that you don't need more rooms. So, because if you build to 80% capacity of room usage, first of all, in some places, to get to that level, right now, I think in some places we're probably at 110 to 120% capacity. We have more things going on in a building than you might ideally want. To get to 80, I'm not necessarily sure how you get to that point. You'd have to think about all the classrooms you'd have to free up that are currently being used.
So again, and I believe Will may be the guy that has this data. What we looked at last year had a nice number to shoot for equal usage throughout the buildings. It wasn't a this classroom's this class. It was just a number. Like if you took all our students and kind of knew what like each building we should be shooting for what percentage. Is that something we can kind of determine? Kind of what the goal should be? Kind of like obviously class sizes are numbers and classrooms are different sizes. But when we look at our building, we look at every building, we know about what the capacity should be. And I don't mean max or minimum. I mean what would be a good, comfortable capacity. That'd be the first question I would have is where do we want to be? Because I don't want to be at 92% at every building, right? Some buildings, like you said, were over 100%. Well, that can help answer a lot of these questions. Like we might know immediately that we cannot fit everybody without bringing in a building that is currently rented by BOCES. Or we might find out that, all we really got to do is shift to get proper building usage, but now we got to figure out how we want to use those buildings. again, we looked at,
Deciding how we want to use them first, and then maybe having the consideration of population numbers in that building, but I think it's maximizing the use of space for students, that you might have a building where 90% makes sense, because that, for the populations that exist there, the classroom instruction that needs to happen, it makes more sense. Maybe you have more of the ENL in a different building, in special ed in a different building, so their class sizes are smaller, their capacity numbers-wise would be smaller, because we would have more numbers of small ratio classrooms.
again, the presentation made by John Dalbo and Will about this, it looked perfect to me, the way they presented it last year, and I understood it. I don't know if anyone here has had the chance to look at it or not. Have you seen it?
I have seen it, and I like a lot of what was done. It was based on the number of 20, but I think in my head, there's different classrooms spaces for different purposes.
Right.
In a general classroom space, for general instruction of a full classroom of kids, you're generally looking at 770 square feet. That's kind of a standard, I think. Will might get me if I'm wrong. Is that the building, that the state ed building? I'm sorry, I'm talking to the audience, I'm not supposed to, but 770 is kind of
the old one, I think it's bigger now, but that's pretty good.
like so a lot of rooms you look at like 760 square feet, because that was a, state ed used to offer aid, and you had to have 760 square feet for a classroom space. So if you use that and say, we want one classroom of kids in a space of 770 square feet, and then, from my practice, when you don't need to have 760 square feet if a teacher, one teacher is going to teach 6 or 7 kids at a time. You don't need that much space. So you can probably put into a space that big, you might be able to put 2 people providing intervention services in small group that could operate with, some ways to block in the same room. Right now we have places where there's 4. There's 4 teachers trying to work with 4 to 6 kids. That's too many kids. So one of the things I would like to offer is, what do we define as acceptable, appropriate classroom space? And so I would use the guide of, if you want to have a classroom of kids, look for 770 square feet. And that doesn't mean if it's 765, it's inappropriate, but it's a target. And then for other instructional purposes, you would want one teacher for 380 square feet, about half, for intervention purposes. And what I'm trying to work on right now is, if that would be our target, then I would work with the principals and say, how many classroom spaces do you have? How many of the smaller spaces do you have? And then you compute what would be the optimal usage of that space, right? And then the other question is, to build capacity for the future, you right now have class size caps as board policy, which I believe are 25 at your lower grades and 28. These were passed in 1995. Mm-hmm. So those are caps, but nobody really wants their 4th grade kid, I think, in a room of 28 kids. So what's the target you're looking for? And you establish a target. Now, my practice is, when you're talking about the youngest kids wanting to crack the code, the teaching of reading at the lowest levels is probably the most critical instruction there is, and that requires smaller numbers of kids. And then when you begin to move up through the levels, you don't need to have that small, you can go bigger. So what are those guidelines for a class? What are we shooting for? And then you build your capacity on the target, and you have a range. You build a low range and the top of the range. And if you build capacity for the low range, if the enrollment increased, you have built-in flexibility. Does everybody understand? You've got built-in flexibility to absorb more kids, because things are going to happen. And no matter how if you have 5 elementary buildings, you're going to have numbers that won't divide well. And once in a while, you're going to slip over the targets, because that's what happens. But if you slip over the target continuously, then you need to make a correction. But that's how I would look, because that way you can use all your space, but you'll still have room to absorb more kids should the situation create itself. The question is, how many spaces do you have? How many do you need? And in what buildings do you have more need than that adequate space? That's really what you're talking about.
Yeah, I was wondering, when do we get that to that point?
The work that was done, the table that we created last year was great. I'd like to add a piece that talks about these definitions of appropriate classroom space, and be able to say, this is where we need to kind of target to get to. In order to do that, we got to shift. Some kids are going to have to come out of here, and they're going to have to go somewhere. And where are there places where where those ratios are really low? So that's kind of, I'd like to work with that document and combine this definition of appropriate space to be able to kind of find out where we're over capacity, where we're under capacity, that gives us targets to think about as we design alternates for your consideration.
Yeah, thank you.
Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Yeah. So again, I know that was backing us back up on that, so the number of plans. I know Lori and I had a huge debate about number of plans. I definitely think when you finally bring it, there should only be several. Two or three. What I wasn't looking to do was tonight say, look, you got to bring us 3, that's it. Because there's so many variables. Again, do we want to, like, I just don't see why we need to give you, like, and maybe this was just me thinking too far through. When you go back on Thursday, next Thursday's the meeting, like, okay, we're going to work on 3 plans, let's come up with 3 plans. I'm thinking you're going to talk about all the different ideas and almost like Survivor.
Yeah. You're going to have a lot of options.
Yeah, okay.
And then you're going to evaluate the options and whittle them down.
So again, that's exactly what I was thinking, just not able to convey that properly. I'm okay with a final, I'll say several, I would like more than 2, but around there coming to us at the end.
Okay, and I would like to believe that as we consider options, you're going to know what options were considered.
Right.
And what we're eliminating and what were the reasons for, eliminating them. And listen, it's 2 or 3 is a guideline. Okay, all I want to know is if we came up with 1 and you said, I wanted more, and then you say, this doesn't meet our needs. Or if we came up with 6 and you said, that's way too many. So we just want some guidance. 2 to 3 would mean if the committee felt really strongly about 4, they'd bring you 4. Right. If they feel strongly about 2, they're going to bring you 2 because we don't want to bring, if they don't meet the critical priorities, then I think we shouldn't bring them to you.
And I'm great with that. What I'm asking is, between now and then, if there's something being eliminated, I would really like to know the concept as to why it's not being further looked into.
Well, I hope for my leadership, we're going to make this process transparent. So not only you're going to know, but we're going to put the minutes out and we're going to tell the whole world, this is what we were thinking about, and here's why we're not thinking about it.
Okay. And that's just, again, I'm coming from a world where things weren't transparent, so I appreciate that.
But I think you need to know the whole process going through so that you can understand why some ideas were, and what were some of the issues that came up that weren't covered until we actually got in the process itself.
Maureen, does that make you feel better? Did I do it right now?
You did.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think just to echo that, I think like a 30,000-foot view of the methodology, and as options are being strongly considered or reconfigured or eliminated would be really helpful with the ability to drill down into more specifics should we have questions.
No, that's great. And I don't think you can laugh a little bit. There is, we've got to be clear, some of the options will not just be redistricting. Mr. Vanderbilt's right. Redistricting is keeping everything kind of is and making slight adjustments. Reconfiguring means we're thinking about reconceptualizing how it's done. And so everybody should know that redistricting by, some of the better, some people say better options are to reconfigure some parts or all of the district in order to meet these priorities. So I think it's important because somebody says, well, you just said it was redistricting. That's why I think it's important to put on the table in open session so everybody knows that reconfiguring might not mean, it could mean the whole district, it could mean a part of the district, and as an option for you to consider. So, and there's there's bigger districts that do things in different ways. The more you create economy of scale, sometimes the easier it is to be efficient, but there's an impact. To do that, there's an impact. It changes the way things are done. That's what we were trying to explain at the opening meetings. How much are you, in order to get some things, some really good outcomes could be created, but it might take some big shifts in your current practice to get there. Those are we have to be able to bring small number, very small change, some change, bigger change, that kind of concept. Then it's your call based on your understanding of the process, the feedback that the committee, the public, not only the committee will give you feedback, but the public will give you feedback, so that you can make an informed decision. Under building capacity, I think, we really kind of worked that piece through. A question, right now we currently lease classroom space to BOCES. Winchester Academy as a BOCES school in 2026-27. They will be moving to a whole different site, and they may still, my belief is they'll probably still need some classroom space within the district. They would like some.
You're correct.
Do you want to add any more about what your knowledge?
Sure. The new facility that BOCES is looking at renovating is an old banking facility at the corner of Dick and Walden Avenue, huge key bank center formerly. And they are in the process of renovating that so that that can be a very comprehensive program to serve Erie 1 BOCES. And they had spacing concerns on the future here in West Seneca, knowing that we were facing redistricting. And another community to the northern part of Erie County is also no longer going to lease a facility to BOCES. However, in speaking with the district superintendent, Mike Capuana, there is still going to be a need and a desire to have programs embedded in districts so that students have access to typical peers, so that they have integration of programs. So there is still a desire by BOCES to lease space from us. It would not have to necessarily be at Winchester Academy, but I think if we have the space and the capacity to do so, I would really appreciate us being, one, not only a good partner to BOCES, but two, it may allow our own students who access BOCES programs to be able to do so in district, minimizing their transition. And third, and equally important, is the revenue that we receive from BOCES. It is a tremendous revenue source for us to lease classes to BOCES. So once we have our redistricting plans or semi-final plans, there very much is still a desire for BOCES to lease classrooms from us.
Just that question, though, the issue here is that you have to reserve space for additional self-contained classrooms inside of school buildings.
So is there any concept of what they would like? Like, we're not talking about like a classroom in every building in the district. Have they given any ideas of what we would like or what they would like?
So initial thoughts were still 6 to 8 classrooms, if possible. I don't yet have grade level information on that, though. And we, as the host district, can really dictate where that is. It does not need to be at Winchester Academy, but we do need to make sure that it's age appropriate for the students, that we're not placing a high school BOCES program in an elementary building or vice versa. So we do need to be sensitive to the grade level that they're looking at, and I don't yet have that detail.
Okay.
I don't know as though BOCES knows that yet, because they're still working on their plans of their new facilities.
So I guess that's the other thing, the couple things I would ask about that is, I know at one point when they were housed here, they had their own principal, their own everything, and then they were housed here, so they were integrated with our students also. So that would be 6 to 8. So at no point are they thinking like one classroom in every elementary school? That just wouldn't work for them, right?
It could. That's not ideal. That's not ideal, because BOCES will assign a supervisor.
Okay,
Obviously, it's more convenient if that's a consolidated program, so that the supervisor can be on site or visible as much as possible.
Right, okay.
That would be the ideal, and I'm sure the ask from BOCES. We may not have the capacity to do that, and there are BOCES supervisors who travel between sites and locations, and so they're on site only part-time in that one particular school, because BOCES programs might be spread among 2 or 3 different school sites.
Okay. Yeah, I was just trying to wrap my head around some one big site or 2 sites, but they're not looking to be spread like throughout the district.
It wouldn't make sense for them,
Right.
related service-wise, administration. It's better to have some concentration so that they can build in the sports, and they can also do like the educational piece of doing integration for their particular classes.
Okay.
It makes it more meaningful for both.
My own
parts of
personal
things.
experience is that BOCES had 2 classes in elementary school. They had a primary, they had an intermediate, and the kids were taught by BOCES teachers, but included in special areas, and they had opportunities to take advantage of the staffing there.
Okay.
So in some places, they try to group in larger clusters, like Dr. Kruger was saying, but I'm not sure that the difficulty will be that I'm not sure they know exactly what that's going to look like until they get their renovation.
So again, moving forward, you guys can decide. I would be okay including in our plans a spot or two for BOCES to do kind of what they're looking for. I'm not against, I'm not really, no BOCES. So however that works out is fine by me. I don't know what everyone else thinks about that.
Yeah, I guess the timing of that's all going to be very important when those decisions are being made. Concurrently to us doing this work, they're making some plans for themselves. So we need to factor that in.
Yes.
Because we're talking about space.
So
is that space going to be available or isn't it? If that particular space being Winchester is not going to be available, we need to know that because it's all going to go into the equation. Right?
Where I think we have the greatest flexibility, we should always be putting kids first, right? And where I believe we have the greatest flexibility is where the adults go. And right now we have an entire wing, our former East Elementary School, which is on the campus of East Middle School, that houses central registration and curriculum offices. That could be a potential spot for BOCES. Maintaining their space at Winchester Academy could be a potential solution still for BOCES going forward. I think it's much easier for us as adults, and we should always be leading by example. You can put my office anywhere. What's best for kids is what we should focus on first, not only our own students, but when we can be the ideal partner with BOCES. So I think we let what's best for kids drive the decision, and adult offices we can work out later.
Yeah, I think it would be, I think everyone would agree that we want to stop moving people around and stop doing that and get everybody under one roof. Our central office, the whole idea of central office, I believe, is to be centralized. So if we could get you all under the same roof, that would be great.
That would be much appreciated. I would very much appreciate that.
So I would piggyback on that. I don't necessarily want your plans to be figuring out where central office goes. I think we should just say, don't assume they're part of any of the school buildings, and we'll figure it out after.
Other thoughts on the
Right.
BOCES question from this side?
Yes.
Jeremy? Sarah?
No, I just, that's a tricky situation for you to kind of try and figure with using that space versus not using that space versus using some of that space embedded in these plans. So.
I would agree, though, if it allows for some of our students to stay in district that would normally need a BOCES placement wherever, that sounds like, a great way to kind of see, exposure to students within their own district, exposure to potential teachers if they were to able to lessen the need for, that particular classroom space.
I guess listening, my recommendation would be to make the question of keeping space available for BOCES placements, put it in the important if possible place, right?
That's what I was thinking, too.
Right, and I like, if you gotta do the top first, and then if we can, then we'll look to see how we might be able to do it.
It could be a linchpin. It could be a linchpin to freeing up that space at Winchester. And so we need to be considerate of that. Because that revenue, everything that Dr. Kruger just outlined is really important. So, but I also think that when we get down to it, that space at Winchester is going to be important to us to reconfigure appropriately.
Let me just jump this on, is reopening Winchester as a school something that you would consider?
I think we should absolutely consider using all the buildings we currently have. But who's going to be shocked by that response by me?
I would just offer to reopen it as a school for students. You have to, it will incur large costs, an additional principal, counselor, social worker,
School nurse, secretary.
clerical support. right there were 5 positions that probably are going, and then there's utilities and custodial people. It's probably $500,000 that you don't have in your budget right now.
I mean, yeah, I know, and I know it's financial, but I believe we do provide everything at that building now, just for other groups of people.
So,
We provide custodial,
That's
food
paid-
service.
But it's all paid for by the week.
Oh, I understand. I mean, I'm just saying, I mean, the building's
Yeah, I don't think
currently being
anybody's-
used.
I don't think anyone's ignorant to the fact that pulling that lever is going to come at a cost. And, those are things that need to be considered. You just have to make sure that, that's why you have reserves and you have things like that. And you need to look at what we want to do. And we also know that we could be creating opportunities for increased UPK, which would be a bonus and a benefit. Yeah, I mean, 100% you're correct on everything you said there. But are we building the school district that we want for the next 20 years and righting a lot of wrongs along the way?
If I can kind of piggyback on what Vince was saying, we have UPK opportunities, but we also have the opportunity of the students that would be potentially suspended, that we're paying for them to go to BOCES, right? Like, I mean, these are all things just to be considered, but that's revenue going out that could stay within the district. So some things might wash out, and I think when you're looking for transparency, that those are the options that we want to hear. So it might be that it is 3 or 4 options, because you have to put all that on the plate.
Yep. And that's why it's important, we have to bring in the fiscal impact too.
Yes.
There's an impact for kids, but there's going to be a fiscal impact. There's a loss of revenue, which is probably somewhere around, my guess is about $600,000.
yes.
So you're losing the $600,000 revenue and adding on top, there's going to be expense on top.
But the $600,000 revenue may be leaving anyway. We
It's
don't
going
know.
to leave.
Yeah.
Right. But if you try to add on top of it, it could compound it. But I will work, if the committee goes in that direction, in terms of, you could also have different kinds of things operating, may not require some of the costs that you're talking about. But if you don't have to organize it as a school reportable to state ed, you could do different things. So we just have to work through some of those pieces. If that's an option, then we try to take advantage of it.
I definitely would like it considered, but I don't know that it's going to happen or not, but I want it considered.
Okay.
Just me.
Dr. Kruger, Mr. Bannon talked about centralizing central office. It's not really about redistricting and providing students education, but it's about how are you going to use all the space in the district. To what extent do you want a plan that, how important is to have a plan that allows the central office administrators to be housed in one location, somewhere in the district?
So, again, I personally don't want the redistricting committee to worry about it. I think we keep them at Ebenezer, and we'll figure out where administration and central office and all that can go once we have the kids all figured out. Just my opinion.
I would like slightly more consideration in that I don't want to have to move them every year to different places.
I agree, but I figure that out once we have the kids placed. Or separately.
I don't think it has to be a priority for the committee, but it would be nice to give it consideration.
Yeah.
And can I go back to the BOCES thing real quick? This might be way beyond the scope. Do we know how many West Seneca students are receiving services at that location currently?
I don't know offhand. I don't want to put Jackie on the spot. I don't know if she has an idea, but I can get that data for you and let you know. You're talking specifically how many West Seneca students are at the Winchester Academy presently?
Yes, and I mention it because if we don't keep that program a consideration, then where are our students going to go? And we already have students at home waiting for placements, and they need to be in a school building.
I can get that data on how many students, West Seneca students, are presently at Winchester Academy.
Thank you.
And really, the goal of this BOCES new facility is to expand their capacity. They're going to be having, it's tens of thousands of square feet that they are going to be now taking over as their own facility, and beautifully renovated. We had a meeting there on site last week and saw renderings of what they're going to be doing. It will be phenomenal when it's done, but there'll still be a need in district where there's the capacity. So I would still appreciate hosting them if possible. But I'll get that data.
And it's really, I mean, I think to Mr. Beatty's point, Ebenezer, just within this conversation, what's the future of Ebenezer? It's a building that's aging, it's not eligible for capital improvement project aid. It's a thought, it's not really a question for you, but in the back of your mind, like that space, at some point, to maintain it is going to be challenging, and there's a cost to it, and at what point is there a thought? It's mostly just for your consideration, rhetorically speaking, where are you going with Ebenezer in the future?
It's not going to be a school probably ever again, West Seneca Public School, so I'm not really worried about it right now. I'm definitely not moving anyone out of there anytime soon.
Well, I guess some of the questions,
I've got a year left.
Do you ever foresee, selling, moving everything out and selling the property?
That, I mean, maybe, but not anytime. I'm not interested in having that discussion currently.
We don't still own Bellwood, do we?
It's for sale.
We have Garden View, I think, or Gardenville?
We had some conversation about E&L instruction. To what extent is it, is it a priority to any extent to try to build capacity to at least offer E&L on both sides, in two parts of the district?
Thank you.
I'm working on it. So is that a priority? Do you think that should be a priority? Not to say that you have to do it, but have the capacity to be able to do it.
I think so.
I think it'd be helpful to families, for sure. Vince just had that example of out by McKinley traveling over to, by Northwood. So I think that would be very helpful to the families if we could.
I'd be interested to hear what the kids think, though, because there's a high level of community that comes from having them centrally located in one place, high level of services. I didn't get to go to the dinner this year, but I know in that experience, there's been a relationship with the staffing that's, social studies, math, and then also the specials with training and things like that in places that kind of creates a very positive atmosphere for them. So I just want to make sure that if we are separating, we're able to still allow for the same opportunities.
Don't create a problem that doesn't exist.
Right.
Well, that being said, that doesn't mean it has to be in the northernmost point of the district. There could be an option so again, pros and cons of separating to two, or pros and cons of staying together. Staying together could mean maybe they're at a more centralized location. Again, I'm hesitant to say that because I'm not familiar where they would fit because we haven't redistricted or reconfigured. But if, say, there was a more central location, that could be better. I do know one of the pros of being closer is families typically,
Attend events and
stuff.
start to become part of the community, but sometimes that first step is having a little bit of that comfort.
Yes, and the community as a whole, though, you want to take them apart. So one thing I would ask is, what do the professionals say, the people that run the program? What do you guys, have we surveyed them and talked with them?
No, I haven't talked to them.
So, I mean, I would love to see, I think it should be an option.
We have instructors and administrators with those programmings that are on the committee, and they can provide guidance, and we can also certainly talk to those people.
Yeah. I'd like to see the options, but I don't know that I'd want to make any kind of a recommendation at all without more knowledge on that. So, but I don't think we should take it off the table.
Well, I think it goes back into the important if possible.
Yeah.
Under consideration, right?
Perfect.
Well, how many students receive the E&L services, do we know, roughly?
How many?
How many students, yeah.
I don't want to make a guess, so.
I mean, because if it was only like 9 and 5 on the west side, that'd be ridiculous.
I think it was like 70 or 80.
It's much more than that.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, like if that was the...
Yeah, is there a need?
Yeah.
Is there really a need for it? Well, we can assume that based on...
I don't want to...
John Dalbo, sir, do you happen to remember any of that when we've discussed the amount of kids in the E&L?
It fluctuates, but around 75.
Okay, cool. Thank you, sir.
based on the current demographics, you're going to make some assumptions
Yeah, I understand
that,
what you're saying, right.
that it's going to increase. That,
Well, it's increased, it's not as, the increase in this district is not as much as in in other districts in western New York. So your percentage of the population in my head is somewhere around 3%. So there is a, what do you call that, the law, diminishing return rate. The reason it's centralized is because you create more efficient use of staffing to do it.
100%.
The question is, could it, to Mr. Beatty's point, can we house
where are those
in a more
students
central location?
Yeah,
Where
so
those
I guess
students
you
live,
say,
yeah.
if
So-
70% of them are living on the east side and doing 30
Sure.
on the west, doesn't make sense to disrupt now.
Yeah, I don't believe it's that, I agree with you. I believe my intuition is early on, there were more families on the east side, but as I looked at placement of, families, it's definitely expanded. So I think it's shifted more toward the central part of the district. So, but that's a good point. I mean, the point to be made is, what's the bang for the buck? That's why it goes under the important, if possible, consideration place. That would be my recommendation.
Yes, so again, that if possible, that's where the whole debate would be, this is where they live, this is why we don't want to do it, this is where they, I would,
Because that becomes,
That's where you do
we
the
also
work.
build the capacity, whether somebody actually pulls it off, that's not this committee's decision, that's your decision. That's a whole, but if the plan provides an opportunity to do it, then we could look at that, and then you could look to take advantage of it if you had that.
pros and cons of several of those. Perfect.
So I think I think that was very helpful, and I think this is kind of the boundary points, gives a lot of latitude within, but also doesn't allow the plan, work to come to you and then find out it does not meet your needs at all. So I think this is really helpful, and I appreciate you taking the time, to work through this a little bit. Is there anything else you'd like, anything else you want the committee to have in their head as they're doing it?
Again, the only thing I'll say is just don't have them afraid to, don't have them just say, oh, this is a bad idea, we're not going to talk about it. I've always felt involved in this stuff to this point, not with you, in the past, where we don't talk about it, we're not bringing it up. Whatever ideas they want to talk about, and not be afraid. And I appreciate what they've done so far.
Well, when they really look at their plans that they've talked about prior, or we start to brainstorm others, the very first thing, you got to go to these critical priorities and say, let's make sure it meets these things. We got to play it out, and that's going to take some time. So we're going to begin our look this month. We'll begin looking at the elementary, because that's where some of the bigger issues, really reside. And then as part of that conversation, then it's going to, by necessity, because where you have space, you have opportunity, and where you don't have space, you have issues that have to be resolved. So, because at the middle level, there's issues to be resolved as well. But we'll keep you informed along the way. Thanks very much for your time.
Would it be inappropriate to remind them that this conversation happened? Maybe not
I'm going to
everyone.
review it with the committee first thing. That's the first thing we're going to do when we meet next week.
I'm just saying it's on, it's going to be online.
We'll just, as a group, as a team, we'll work on it together and make sure everybody gets it.
Cool.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Make sure that they know that we appreciate everything they're doing, because it's
Yeah.
a lot of work, and, the community has their eye on that, and I know that they're passionate about what they're doing, so
They are.
please just keep it in mind to remind them how
I've
great
met with
they
them
are.
once, but they were all, people were very engaged, and they really want to do a good job, and they just want, and they appreciate the idea that we'll take the time to do it well, so that, when it's thoroughly done and done well, it's a lot more defensible. You want a defensible process. It's open, transparent, thoughtful, and meets clear standards. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you so much. Board discussion, back again. Any other items the board wants to discuss? So that being said, can I have someone make a motion to convene an executive session for discussion related to employment history of a particular persons and contract negotiations?
I'll make a motion to go into executive session.
Excellent. May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Sarah, any discussion on it? Probably not. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Nope. Passes 7-0. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. We're going to go into executive, and then we'll complete our meeting after that. There will be no more than likely, there'll be no more public discussion or voting taking place. We're just going to do our executive and then come back and adjourn. Thank you. Take some cookies.